Rehab Code does, it is highly unlikely that we can obtain a Rehab Code payment when it's a clin neg case. We can always ask, but the NHS resolution and the MDU and the MPS, who represent private doctors, don't tend to engage in any kind of payments for rehab prior to liability being resolved. And it is a problem because clinical negligence cases can take quite a long time to investigate. And, you know, it can sometimes be a year or more before we've got the medical reports that we need to be able to say, yes, we think there's a case here, and to write to the defendant and with our letter of claim. So it's a frustration of mine because I've primarily come from a clinical negligence background, and it's so hard when you've got a very injured client. You feel that they need rehabilitation, and you've got to wait basically until liability is resolved. But there are a few other things that we can do outside of these more formal processes to try and access rehab for our clients, including the clin neg clients. So yeah, so some of the things that we do are probably things that you do as well. Signposting to charities. We work with lots of charities, and in our team, brain injury charities in particular, like Headway and Different Strokes. And so we regularly signpost our clients where appropriate to charities who might be able to provide them with some support. On all of our cases, we recommend that our clients have a benefits assessment. So that's somebody reviewing the benefits that they're receiving, seeing if they think that that the client is receiving the benefits that they're entitled to, and challenging that if there's an under provision. So that can, although it's not directly rehabilitation, it builds into that person's sort of life, and like, you know, if they're then receiving the benefits that they're entitled to, it may enable them to access more to get rehabilitation. We can also consider whether our clients need to be referred back to NHS provision if there are unmet needs identified in the reports that we've obtained. And we can sometimes do that, or our clients can take a report to their GP and say, look, this neurologist has said that I need this treatment. Can you, is there any way you can make a referral for me through the NHS? So we can do that. Obviously, it can take longer when it's not privately funded, but it's something that we can try. And then one of the positives of the pandemic has obviously been the increase in online services for people. So, for example, Different Strokes have online exercise classes. There are lots of support groups, Headway, the Silver Lining Charity. I don't know if any of you know about the Silver Lining Charity, but loads of brain injury charities have, every day there's something on that's, a source of support if it's not some kind of physical rehabilitation. So those are other options that we can and do think about when we can't go through those more formal routes. And yeah, we try and keep it at the forefront of our minds, because obviously the legal process is set up to obtain compensation, obviously, but that's not the whole of it. And actually getting enabling our clients to make the best possible recovery is really important, because that's what's going to make a difference for the rest of their lives. And like I say all the time, the earliest possible rehabilitation is usually going to get the best results for that client. So there are my sort of overall thoughts on being proactive in terms of rehabilitation. So that's the approach that we take. We try and collaborate with defendants where we can. We try and keep the pressure on so that we can access rehab as early as possible. So now I wanted to, I can send you the slides, Jill, and then you can, if anybody wants to look at the links, these are all the links for rehab prescription, serious injury guide, and the Rehabilitation Code. So I wanted to now have a kind of a bit more of a chat about our experience of working with case managers and rehab teams, and what kind of what we look for, what helps us, those kind of things. So because the team that I work in deals with brain injury cases only, we tend to look for case managers who have Babacom membership. But our other teams in the firm, we're always looking for case managers who can show their competency, because obviously there are a lot of case managers and we want to have the best ones for our clients. So CMS UK and Babacom are obviously two organisations that can show that case managers have met those competency requirements. And you probably aware that Babacom has a competency framework. I'll put the link on there as well. And that I've got sort of a summary of that on the next couple of slides. And it just ensures that case managers are aware of what the requirements are of them and meeting those requirements. We also, obviously, and I think this happens everywhere, we go a lot on word of mouth and recommendations. So there'll always be emails going around within the firm as to I've got this client, I need a case manager for them. Does anybody know, can anybody recommend somebody good? So we obviously take recommendations from our colleagues and from other people that we work with. So so sometimes barristers will recommend a really good case manager to us. So there's obviously some of that word of mouth as well. And the important things really for us is we need to work with people that we can get along with, and I'm sure the case managers who are listening will know that often we'll set up like a meet and greet with clients as a sort of are you going to it's a very personal relationship that can last a long time. So you really need to, the family, the client need to feel that this is somebody that they can work with. So we'll always set those up at the outset just to make sure that we think that there's going to be a successful relationship there. And I'm going to repeat this a lot over the next few slides, but great communication, that's one of the real key things that's really important when we're looking for case managers, because our cases, especially the cases that I work on, brain injury cases, they can go on for quite a long time and they're very complex. And so we need to have case managers and rehab teams that can communicate really well with us and tell us, if there's something going wrong, if there's an unmet need that needs fulfilling. And like I said at the very start, I really see that the relationship between solicitors and case managers is a two-way street. So it's not just us getting a report and sending it to the case manager and saying, this is what you need to do, because we're not there day to day seeing people. And we often, it comes from the support workers, the therapists, to say, actually, there's a need here that isn't being met, that no one's really picked up on yet. And we need to hear about that, because if we don't know about those things, then we can't get support for those needs if there are any unmet needs. And I was just going to go into a bit more detail about that. So these are the competency standards, Babacom competency standards. Communication, strategy, coordination and management. So this is for case managers, but obviously if you're part of a rehab team, these will be the sorts of things that are going on. And then these other things: monitoring, duty of care, professionalism and personal attributes. So we look for all of these things, and that's obviously what Babacom want to see from case managers as well. What is needed from rehab teams? So one of the things that I think is really helpful for us is excellent record keeping, and the actual detail on the records is very important. So I know support workers, rehab assistants keep records, and what's more useful than a list of went to the shops, I don't know, made lunch, is those real moments of personal interaction. So if there was a real challenge in going to the shops, they didn't want to get up, it's the actual challenges that the rehab assistant has to deal with, which I know happens. If that doesn't come through on the records, it doesn't get through to us because we're not there day to day. So I think so what I've said here, it's quite easy to list activities, but I think what can be of real value in records is detailing where the challenges were. And I haven't done this job, but I just know from speaking to case managers and support workers in the past that there is so much that goes on. A lot of it is like the emotional support and the sort of coaching to have motivation that doesn't necessarily get into records because it may just be more of a list of activities. And I think those are the real valuable things that can feed into our reports, that then feed into the case, that then get that person the support that they're going to need for the rest of their lives. So that's one thing that I really think can be valuable. I just touched on it before about communication and feedback. So again, we're not there day to day. You know far more about that person's daily life than we do. And so again, what's working, what isn't? Are there any needs that the person has that haven't come through in any of the reports that we've been obtaining? And if that is fed back to us through the records or just through communications with us, then we can work on that and highlight those issues with the experts that are instructed as part of the legal process. Obviously, MDTs are very useful for kind of bringing together, reviewing what's been happening and identifying what's not working. But I think that the day-to-day support with rehab assistants, support workers, can be really valuable in picking up those things and getting those fed back. I think that, this is just a general thing about helping people, a general passion for helping people, everybody being actively engaged in the rehab. And this, I've just put this point about remembering who the client is, because I've been involved in cases in the past where, unfortunately, the case manager has developed a really good relationship with, say, one of the family members, like a husband or wife of the injured person. And actually then it leads down a road that isn't necessarily the best for the client themselves. And I think it's just something that I don't think that I'm thinking of one particular case. I don't think that particular case manager really realised what was happening, but actually they weren't serving the person who needed their services. They were servicing the wife instead and their needs. Remembering that obviously there is, it's a family, you've got to think of everybody's needs, but making sure that it's not to the detriment of the injured person. And the final point there, we don't always seek witness statements from case managers or support workers, but there are some occasions where it can be really useful, like, for example, where, just that day-to-day contact with the injured person just brings about a lot more detail than the experts that we instruct are ever going to get when they meet somebody for a couple of hours. So sometimes it can be really useful to get a witness statement about that, the day-to-day challenges, what works, what doesn't work, and it can be very useful for the case. And obviously that then feeds into that person getting the funds for their future. So just a few other things that I thought it might be useful to mention from our perspective. So not all of our cases are going to get sort of 100% liability in their cases. So for some people, the defendant might allege that they were contributory negligent. So if they were a pedestrian who stepped out when the lights weren't, when it wasn't on the green man or whatever, they might have a deduction, or if they weren't wearing a seatbelt or something like that. And so, in those cases, there's probably going to be a deduction from, instead of getting 100% of the compensation, they might get 80% or for example. And I guess it's just being aware of that sometimes people have to borrow money from other pots of their compensation when they've got those liability splits or they're not receiving all of it. Same as causation, it's a slightly different thing, but sometimes, our clients have pre-existing problems, so they may have an issue that needs dealing with now, but only 70% of that is due to the negligence or the accident, so they're not going to receive money for everything. So it's just being aware that in some cases, we always get as much as we can for them, but in some cases, they might not be recovering the cost of all the therapy, all the care, and that we always advise our clients about recoverability, and that even though they're having these services, they might have to borrow money out of other pots of their compensation, like for example their loss of earnings claim, to pay for some of the therapies. So we do talk to our clients a lot about that, but I think it might be useful for you to have an awareness that in not all cases everything is fully funded by the case. Proving a loss is something that comes up on a lot of our cases. So, obviously many of our clients were independent before they had their accidents, and they find it really hard to accept support. And you probably find this as well a lot. And sometimes we will have families that want to provide all the support for the injured person, and they don't want people coming in and interfering or being involved. But we have to think when we take on clients and when we've got our cases, we have to think long term for the rest of their lives. We've got a client in our caseload at the moment. It's a lady in her 60s, and at the moment her husband is providing all of the support for her, and they're really resistant to having any outside support. But we have to and we can't make her do anything, but we've really got to say to her, well, what if your husband's getting older, what about when he can't look after you, or what if he's not there, who's going to look after you then? And we have to try and highlight to people that they need to try these things out, because if they don't try it and they don't prove that they have that need, the case isn't going to pay for it for the future. And I know it's really difficult because you don't want to, and we never force people into doing things that they don't want to do. But if they don't try it, and if they don't prove that there's a need there, the defendants aren't going to pay for it. So I mean, it's a job that we have to really speak to our clients about quite a lot. But I think maybe it's useful for you to know that as well, that we, unless somebody's going to accept support, the defendant isn't going to pay for it. So, we've got to prove that loss. It's no use us saying, oh, well, they're not having any care now, but they will need 30 hours care a week from this date, because if they're not having anything, then the defendant's just going to say, well, they're never going to use it, so I'm not paying for it. So that's just a point to sort of note from our perspective. And then you may come across other parties that we deal with, so expert witnesses. Sometimes support workers will accompany clients to appointments. We've had that in cases before. I don't know if any of you have done that previously. And many of our clients have deputies as well, so the money will be managed by a deputy, and you may also be quite familiar with that. But I think, in cases where we've had support workers accompanying clients to expert witness meetings, they can actually add quite a lot of value as well, because the clients often go along and they say, no, it's fine, everything's all right. And then the support worker says, well, what about this? What about that? And they can actually give more of the detail about what it's like day to day. The final point about medical legal expert witness reports, I think that's just to do with, an understanding that we have a lot of other people involved. You might see other reports from other people that we instruct, and sometimes we will send those reports. They're not always in the final version, but they can be useful for you to see, to get an understanding of what a client is like when you're first instructed. So some top tips for working together: communication again. Yeah, like I said before, we need to know if there are issues with somebody's engagement, if they've got any unmet needs. That two-way street of, you know, it's not us telling you what to do. We need to know, you know, what's going on with this person as well. More a point really for case managers is about disclosure of records, because when we're further on into the case, we have a duty of disclosure to the defendants, and usually every 6 months or so we will request records because we have to disclose them to the other side. And yeah, I think it's quite useful if you have quite a simple way of storing and sending the records, because we don't want it to be an onerous task every 6 months. Sometimes if we're discussing things to do specifically with the case, then that's a privileged record. But when I have communication with the case managers that I'm working with, I will usually highlight something if it's privileged so that it can go into like a privileged folder. But yeah, we have had a few difficulties in the past with disclosure. But you know, I think for case managers, just kind of keeping the records in quite a simple way of storing them and sending them is the best way to do it. And again, for case managers, sometimes, so when we're requesting interim payments for our clients so that we can fund rehabilitation, we will often need a forecast for the next 6 or 12 months so that we can put that we can put a figure to the defendant to say, well, this is what our client needs for the next year. And in requesting the interim payment, it can make it easier if we've got a sort of a detailed breakdown of what that money is going to be spent on. And then if we have to make an application and go to court to try and get that interim payment, it gives us more evidence as to why that's needed. So that's just something that, you know, we often ask case managers for, is for a projection as to what's going to happen over the next 6 or 12 months. And that was everything I kind of thought of that I thought might be useful for you. Hopefully that wasn't too much on the first day back after. I don't know if you can see me again now. Oh, here we go.
Can I see you? Where are you?
Oh, there we go.
That's great. Oh, Laura, that was great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It wasn't too heavy. There was actually quite a lot to get through, but
I don't think it was heavy.
Okay.
I think it was. I think having the real legal at the beginning was. I mean, none of us here are lawyers.
Yeah.
But it's really helpful to know that there is that aspect of the case that we just need to be aware of, no matter which part we're working within. Everybody in this room is working for the client in some way, so it's good to know what everyone else is doing. A couple of things. One of the ones I totally agree with your comments about the support workers having to comment on their a bit more detail, and their experience of other than the practicalities of we went to the shop and we bought a loaf of bread. That's what we try and do, and that's incorporated into our training sessions, and we use the electronic tablets.
Oh, right, yeah.
They can put them in there, they're sort of laid out as a template, and then they can download them every day. And what we like to see is, and I think it's through years of, I don't know, other people might know this as well, but through years of working with support staff that did literally just that, I went to the shops and I bought a pie or whatever it was. And we said, hang on now, we all need to be much better at this.
Yeah, because it doesn't tell you anything, does it, about what happened that day, really?
No, and it doesn't tell the MDT. So it's not just you and you're sitting there thinking, well, here are the support worker records. They don't tell us anything. But for the clinical team who are working with the client, we rely on the support staff to give us the information in between each session. And if it doesn't tell us the detail, then they can't progress their therapy sessions. So it actually works really well for everyone. So that's something we really try and work on at Maia, by doing those electronic notes and making them accessible to the whole team, so that we can pick up and say, hang on a minute, what did you actually do there? But it's really I think it's the most important role.
Well, yeah, it is definitely, because just from my perspective, I can't, we're not there every day seeing how this person lives, what their real challenges are, and even the medics that see them, all of the they end up seeing so many different people, but it's everyone just for a couple of hours, isn't it? And
yeah,
as much as you can take information from somebody, you don't know somebody, you don't know their the ins and outs of the daily challenges of their life just by seeing them for 2 hours. It is the people who are there day in, day out. So
you mentioned about going to medico-legal appointments. A lawyer, would you recommend, I mean, there's various people that obviously work with your clients, but would you recommend that the rehab assistant goes with the client to the medico-legal, or the case manager, or a family member, or somebody different?
I think it depends on the level of somebody's injury, really. But I'm thinking of a particular client that we had who would, unless there was somebody with him who knew him well, he would go along to the appointments and say, just brush over everything, everything's fine. And so he would often go with a family member or one of the support workers who knew him really well. So I think it can be the case that a support worker can go, but if it's somebody that has been around for a while and knows them well, but it can be a case manager, it can be a family member. I think it depends. If it's somebody that knows that person well and also feels comfortable to step in and say, well, hang on a minute, you've just said that you don't have any needs overnight. What about when you wake up at 4 a.m. and you try and cook yourself something and you can't, those kind of things. Somebody who will highlight issues when and I mean, a lot of our experts are quite used to this as well, and they may also say that they're going to have like an interview with the client, but then they're going to speak to somebody else for half an hour separately. Because it can be, I guess also it can be a little bit awkward sometimes if somebody's saying, well, everything's fine, and then there's somebody over their shoulder chipping in and saying, well, actually it's not.
I think most of us have had experiences where the client says, oh no, it's all fine, thank you very much. And if it's not with the medical legal experts or even with the GP, it's with the PIP assessors.
No,
I can do that, thanks. And you're thinking, no, you can't. I found that in the past very difficult. I've been on a medico legal appointment with a client who didn't have the insight at all, and was quite aggressive as well. And so when the expert was asking if she could do certain things, I wanted to sort of wave my arms about and say, no, she can't do it. I had to really choose the right moment. And there wasn't at the time. So I said at the end of the session to the expert, it'd be really lovely to catch up later on. I know the client's tired, etc. And that's how I did it. But at the time I was thinking, if that and it was a defendant medico legal expert, actually. She's writing all these things, this client said, I can still get the bus and I don't need any help, thanks very much. I'm thinking, you need 24/7 care.
And I think, well, with brain injury that I deal with every day, insight can be a real issue. And saying that you can do everything when really there's so much more detail to it, and actually you can't, or you can do it but with support.
And I think the relationships, which you've touched on, the communication and relationships is incredibly important, and I think everybody here will probably agree with that, because we all meet clients and we think, oh, this isn't working, or yes, it is working. I don't know if everybody agrees with that. You can turn your mics off now. Who's got some questions for Laura? Wendy.
Hiya.
There you go.
Hi Laura,
Hello.
I'm Wendy. I'm a
Hi.
speech and language therapist.
Hello.
I'm just a treating one, so I never get involved in the medico-legal side.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting what you've sort of outlined, because I think I've got a few cases where I think, oh, that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where that might have come from. And I never know what the legal terminology is, and I'm not involved in that side of the process. But it's really helpful to get that overview of what's going on from the legal side. So thank you.
Great.
Just wondered if you've got any sort of thoughts or suggestions about the whole thing, that at the end of the day, a big part of the legal process is about generating a kind of compensation fund for the person at the end of that. And I've got a couple of young men at the moment who in different ways are incredibly aware of that side of the process.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they're kind of their insight, like you say, isn't great necessarily always. And so in different ways, that their whole focus is on the pot of money.
Yeah.
And kind of that limits in some ways at times their full engagement with rehab, because they kind of, I think, are thinking, I'll just get through this process with all these therapists and support
and then I'll
workers,
just have my money at
and
the
then
end of
like
it.
ding, when the day arrives when there's hopefully some kind of claim, a pot decided and it's issued and given, they kind of maybe don't fully understand what life may be for them moving forwards.
Yeah.
And helping them to have an understanding of the importance of the financial side, but that it's not the absolute overarching thing in their life fully. I'm sort of struggling with in different ways.
It's so difficult. I mean, we have young men who have got brain injuries. I mean, they are the most difficult cases. We've had two really big ones in the team in the last few years. They've both settled now, but they were both injured. One of them was 20 and one of them was 21 when they were injured. And yeah, engagement was one of the most difficult things to deal with. We ended up actually using sort of like incentives to get engagement, which I don't know if everybody would agree that that's the right thing, but it did actually, to actually get them to appointments. There was sort of, if we did have some like sort of small financial incentives, like if they attended all their appointments in a week, then they would get a top. This is cases where we had a deputy as well. They would get a top up into their account. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but then if they didn't, then they don't get that top up. So, but it's really tough, because then you do think as well, are they just going to stop everything as soon as the case ends? And I guess you can't control everything forever, but you can hopefully try and educate people through the process that actually this is better for you in the long run to have these kind of things. I think we found as well, like neuropsychiatric input in these cases was really important. Because, I think Jill and I have discussed this in the past, that, at the age of 20, your brain isn't even fully developed, and you're just at the stage in your life when you're breaking away from your parents, you're growing up, and then you're put back into a position where you're almost like a child again. And I think that is one of the things that young men in particular, from my experience, seem to really struggle with. I don't know if that was helpful at all.
Yeah, I think Scott might. I know that you and Scott, Wendy, you share that. I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, that's
Scott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to ask one other thing. I was just struck by the whole reinforcement through incentives. There's no hard and fast way. Psychologically, it's as a clinical psychologist, a team really needs to have a think about how and when it's used and when it may need to change. So it's always an option, but not always the option you go to.
I don't know. I think in those situations, we just, we were at a loss to like, how are we actually going to get this person to do anything?
Absolutely.
One of those clients, it was always at the very last minute as well. And with our, when we set up appointments with medico-legal experts, there's another really long waiting list, and this appointment's been in the diary for months. And then you get a call like half an hour before the appointment saying, I'm not going, I'm sick, or, there's some excuse as to why they can't go. So, in that situation, to have that incentive that at the end of the week, if you've gone to all your appointments, then you're going to get this top up. That was the only thing that worked. Not that I think it was a really good thing to do. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It does work if there's a clear objective. then it actually those incentives do work. I was actually going to ask a slightly different question, but incentives always comes up. I was intrigued about the question when you asked about discussions, and this happens on most of the people I see anyway, about the case and the place, where it is in terms of its journey. And psychologists are going to talk about how somebody is in their state of mind in relation to that. And I just wonder what it is from the legal side, is how much, I suppose, how much you want to see that in clinical notes, because I inevitably throughout the case will discuss the case to some degree, and it's not discussed with everybody in great detail, it's quite confidential to some degree, and then later it really does come up at near a settlement, or there's more of that in, and how much that should or shouldn't feature, because it's a bit of a tricky one, really.
Because certain things will be, so when it comes to disclosure of records, there will be some things that are obviously privileged because they're to do with the litigation. So if somebody's talking to you about, if they are talking to you about, oh, well, I've been offered this and I don't know what to do, that would all be totally privileged. You have to be redacted from the records anyway. But I don't, it's another difficult one, isn't it? Because you're having those conversations, so you probably want to record them in some way. And I know that the litigation is really hard for a lot of people, and we try our best to not make it so stressful, but it can be a great source of stress. I know it's not really, nobody wants to be doing it, do they? So it's I don't think you need to completely censor completely those conversations, but I think if there was going to be anything in there about quantum discussions, my solicitor's telling me this, and it's probably best to keep it very more vague, just because it's going to have to get taken out of the records in some way. And if we're disclosing records that have lots of redactions in them, the defendant will then say, well, why is there so much stuff in your records that's redacted? What are you, like, it just creates problems, because then they want to know, well, what are you covering up? That
what I've found, Laura, is actually there tends to be, those discussions happen more so in the psychological side and support, and also in support workers, but they happen more so is if the communication between the solicitor and the clinical team, or the solicitor and the client, isn't good. That happens far less if the communication is good. So the solicitor is communicating really well with the clinical team and with the client, and they're all communicating really well. Actually, that doesn't need to feature in a way that would need to be redacted as such. It will feature in a
because they're not like,
this is where I am right now, and that's okay for people to know because it's expected. It goes both ways.
So I think if we're doing a better job and actually talking to them about it, then they're not going to start trying talking to other people like as an outlet for, I don't know what's going on, or trying to work it out in some other way.
On that, and then I'm worded because slightly different the psychology session, but with the rehab support workers similarly, and Jill, I think we've had this discussion, is that conversation or similar conversations about the legal side will come up with support workers a lot. I think support workers are not sure how much they should or not engage in that discussion. And I know there's not supposed to voice opinions, but it's actually quite tricky. What would, as to how much they should engage in those discussions, because it does happen very frequently from what I
I would, I'd never never criticize a support worker for suggesting to their clients that they just give their solicitor a call or send an email if they're worried about something. Because if you've got a good solicitor, they will always answer you very quickly and try and reassure you. So that's obviously what we try to do, and we don't want our clients to feel like they can't approach us or can't ask us a question. And unfortunately, just because of how some people see solicitors, they do feel a bit like, oh, can I ask those questions? But hopefully, the clients that we've got, we try and say to them really early on, look, if you've got any concerns, any problems, please just let me know straight away, and we update people obviously whenever anything's happening on the case. So, but it's about communication, isn't it? Because if a client has a regular update from their solicitor, or they just feel that they can trust them and talk to them about the case, then they're probably less likely to be asking the support worker what they should be doing, or feeling concerned.
Actually, I know Scott and I've worked on a case or a couple of cases where there hasn't been that communication.
Yeah.
Not with Scott and I, but with
yeah.
And that's been, it has made everyone else's job so much harder.
Yeah.
And we've learned definitely here at Maia, unless we know the solicitors we work with are supportive of us, the clinical team, and vice versa, it's very difficult to help that client. You've all got to be, it's such a cliche, but on the same page. You've all got
well, that's the thing, it's such a team, like there isn't, we're all one team, aren't we, like, really? And I think that's how we have to see ourselves. Not, it's like the rehab and the solicitors and the deputy, it's like everybody's,
and that's why I think these sort of things are really important. It's not, when I first started, everyone was, well, my everyone was a little bit precious about their own little thing, their own little space, and it doesn't need to be like that, because we're all trying to do the same thing. The more we share how each other work, the better for us, because I mean, I don't know so much stuff. I know you're the lawyer, so I learn from people like you, and I know that there's Kay over there. She's a care expert, so she'll have a completely different aspect on things as well. So from at every angle, somebody's got their own skill and their own experience, and I just think nobody's experience is a bad one. And I think the relationships that we all have, each of us have with our client, speaking as a case manager right now, it is essential for me that my clients have access to everybody in their team when they need it, obviously within the boundaries. But it is essential. If it's a legal question, they need to be able to access their lawyer. It's a case management one. It's access me. If it's a psychological problem, access their psychologist, and etc. etc. But I don't think anybody needs to be precious about, well, I'm going to just deal with this now. Let's just share it. Let's just together and do more of this. I think it's really, for me, it's really helpful.
And I'm never, we obviously we work with case managers a lot as well, and it's always it's just good to hear from people, isn't it, as to what's going on. I think I feel more concerned when I don't hear anything, and you don't really know what's going on. So it's always I totally agree. It's always good to share what's going on, communicate, obviously, and and I think we can all do a better job when we know what's happening with everybody else.
Right. Okay. Are there any more questions before we round up and finish off? Now's your chance. Anybody? No?
If you have any afterwards, if you want to email Jill or email me, happy to have a chat after as well.
Yeah, that would be good. It's a good opportunity to network as well, isn't it? And to see who's on here. Although some of us have got the wrong names. I've got the wrong name. I don't know what name I've got on here. But it's been great. I mean, we just to remind you also that if you want to know any more, either contact Laura or me afterwards. We run these training sessions or seminars, whatever you want to call them, every month for our support staff and our associates and anyone else that wants to join. And it's a place to learn and to network as well. Our next one is on the 1st of Feb. And it is about fatigue management. So it's definitely more clinical, but anyone can join in. So that's on the 1st of Feb. So please, can you and your team join us? And it's another opportunity to find out what's going on out there, especially when we can't all get out there. And who knows what's going to happen. I think that's it. We've also, if you want a list of our following the rest of our training sessions, we can send those to you, because there are some in there that might be useful to I think most of you actually. We've got a session on benefits and applying for benefits and what's useful for our clients, and I think that affects quite a lot of our clients. We've got a session, we've got the clinical sessions like pain and amputee and spinal injuries, so we've got all of those. We've also got a session booked for CQC and what that means, because we're now CQC registered, and everybody needs to be, well, case managers need to be CQC registered. So that's been a huge undertaking for us. So we've got all these training courses. Also, if you've got anyone in your own teams or if you yourself would really like to share a particular skill you have, then please do let me know, because we would love to have you. We'll arrange it all. From a purely selfish point of view, it's training our support staff, which we do, and we want to make our support workers rehab assistants, so we give them lots of opportunities for training. So it's purely selfish, really, but it also, you know, it gets you out there too. So if you've got any specialism that you want to share, please let me know. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Laura, a big thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Jill, for arranging. Very interesting.
Many thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good new year, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Everyone disappearing.
They are. Thanks, Laura. That was great. Thank you so much.
No, that's okay. It was really good. It's a really interesting group of people.
Yeah, lots of different people. I think we had who have we got left? A couple of people left. So Scott was a neuropsychologist, Kay is care expert, Wendy, neurospeech therapist, and various other people there, case managers. Well, I don't know actually what they are.
Questions as well, because the whole thing about money and incentives, it's such a tough one, isn't it? Because you think, what's the real motivation? But you can get people in the room.
Yeah, I know. I love this sort of thing is great, because there's so many questions out there that people don't know, and there's new case managers, new support staff coming in all the time to the industry, and they're not going to know everything. So if they can join in stuff like this, then it's great, because it just makes life easier, much easier. But that's great. Thank you.
We'll have to meet up again in person when we can.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll come down to see you, and we'll go out for lunch or something.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be lovely.
Yeah. Lovely. If you need anything, let me know.
Yeah.
Or if you want me to, I've already given a talk at your place, so I don't need to come back yet for it.
No, but next time you're in London, let me know. We can, we'll go for lunch or something. And, if you get any other questions come through, happy to deal with those.
Thank you. I'll let you know about our other training sessions. So if you're in the team want to join in, just might be something of interest, just so that they also get the bigger picture. Might be some of them might be interesting. Thanks, Laura. Have a great day.
Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.